I don't know about you, but on release day, I plan to pick up Final Fantasy XVI. But until we reach that day when we're all going to be shut-ins in front of our PS5s for the remainder of June, today, let's discuss the literary roots of the Eikons, which are the stand-in for summons in this game. I'm a huge fan of the series, starting with Final Fantasy VI, the first game that I ever played, and while a lot of the different mainline entries in the series have been hit or miss over the years, Final Fantasy XVI looks absolutely amazing based on the different footage that we've gotten from the trailers released so far. Jesse Cox has a video on TikTok where he describes this game as a combination of Game of Thrones meets Attack on Titan. In Final Fantasy XVI, the Eikons play a somewhat more important role in the story and the game overall than they have as espers or eidolons or summons in prior games, depending on which one you've played. And what's better is that a lot of them are playable in and of themselves. And while we don't know how many of these Eikons are going to necessarily be playable at this point, I wanted to discuss some of the actual literary origins in where these beings come from in our society. Here's the ones that we know will be in the game from the trailer clips that we have. Starting off, Phoenix, one of the two fire icons, and our earliest mention of the Phoenix in ancient Greek literature occurs in the Precepts of Chiron, attributed to the early 8th century BC Greek poet, philosopher, historian Hesiod. In the Precepts, the wise centaur Chiron tells the young hero Achilles in a very roundabout way that a phoenix lifespan is 972 times the length of a long-lived human's life. Classical discourse on the subject of the phoenix, though, also attributes a potential origin of the phoenix to ancient Egypt. Herodotus, writing in the 5th century BC, provides us an account of the phoenix, describing it as red and gold and roughly the size of an eagle. The Phoenix typically has resurrect powers throughout different games, and in Final Fantasy XVI, this icon is held by the dominant Joshua Rossfield, the younger brother of our protagonist Clive, and from the trailer footage we have, it does not look like things go terribly well for him. Next up, Titan. Titan is an icon that originates amongst the people of Eldia, those devils on the island. Sorry, never mind. Wrong IP. According to the theogony of, again, Hesiod, in Greek mythology, the Titans were the pre-Olympic deities. They were the children of the sky god Uranus and the earth mother Gaia, of which there were 6 male Titans and 6 female Titans, or Titanesses. Of them, Kronos mated with his elder sister Rhea, who then bore the first generation of Olympic deities, Zeus, Hades, Poseidon, Hestia, Demeter, and Hera. The Titans were the former gods. Kronos went on to usurp power from his father Uranus and rule over the cosmos with the rest of the Titans, only to in turn be defeated by his son Zeus and the rest of the Olympians, serving as the new pantheon after a 10-year war called the Titanomachy. In Final Fantasy XVI, Hugo Kupka of the Dalmatian Republic is the dominant of the Titan icon and looks to be perhaps a formidable foe to our protagonist Clive. Garuda is a Hindu demigod primarily serving as the vehicle mount for the deity Vishnu, and is also mentioned in Buddhist and Jain faiths, but primarily appears in Hindu texts such as the Puranas and Vedas. He is the son of Kashyapa, the esoteric successor to Shakyamuni Buddha, and is described as king of the birds, protector with the power to travel pretty swiftly anywhere, and is ever vigilant and the enemy to most serpents. In Buddhism, the Garudas were among the beings appointed to guard Mount Sumeru from the attacks of the Asuras. And in the Digha Nikaya's Mahasamaya Sutra, the Buddha is shown making a temporary peace between the Garudas and the Nagas. Yes, those Nagas. Interesting tidbit here. Over time, Garuda became the national emblem of Indonesia and Thailand. Benedicta Harmon of Final Fantasy XVI's Kingdom of Walod is the dominant of the Garuda icon and Warden of the Wind, who also appears to be quite a thorn in the side of our protagonist. Next, is Rama. And this icon in Final Fantasy likely refers to the Sanskrit Rama, typically spelled without the H. Ram is a word mentioned in the Vedas, Hindu texts that we date to prior to the Ramayana, but it is in the Ramayana that we see the character of Rama most prolifically, our hero who is intended to be the 7th avatar of the god Vishnu. He also features prominently in a variety of Buddhist, Jain, and Sikh texts, but I would highly recommend the Ramayana if you haven't read it yet. And religious mythological texts are your cup of tea. Regardless, you may be familiar with Rama and the Ramayana through the 1990s film The Little Princess, where a retelling of the story features pretty prominently in the film. His legendary weapon is the bow and arrow, which in Final Fantasy we see stylized as lightning, which as players we can then use to strike down our demons of choice. This also kind of suggests that Square Enix may be conflating Rama and Indra, the Hindu god of thunder and storms. In Final Fantasy XVI, the icon Rama is commanded by Cidolfus Telamon, this game's Cid, who appears to have some connections to Benedicta in the story. Now that we're halfway through, time to discuss Shiva. In Hinduism, Shiva is the auspicious one who exists on the flip side of Vishnu. If Vishnu is the preserver, Shiva is the destroyer, and the Mahadeva, the great god of the Yoga Samkhya tradition. The earliest textual mentions that we have of Shiva are in the Vedas, but a lot of scholars suggest that Shiva does have pre-Vedic roots, and in one way or another he is somewhat the original god. The Vedas really conflate Agni, Indra, Rudra, and Shiva all into a single deity. Always portrayed as female in Final Fantasy, the traditional image of Shiva is actually as a male deity starting from the Rig Veda. And rather than ice, he's typically featured surrounded by flames, dancing, holding a trident, as he is considered the lord of the dance, yoga, and animals. He's considered the ideal husband, wedded to Shakti, the creative, divine, feminine force, and is usually depicted as an ascetic living atop a mountain, and maybe this is where the ice comes from in Final Fantasy. For lovers of Wukong, the Monkey King, in the Hanuman Chalisa, he is considered to be the 11th avatar of Shiva. In our game, though, the former Princess Jill Warwick of Rosaria is the dominant of Shiva and a trusted confidant to Clive and Joshua. Odin. Come on, I'm sure you all are aware of who Odin is at this point. The One-Eye, All-Father, typically depicted in Final Fantasy riding his night steed, Sleipnir. While brief mentions of Odin or Woden have persisted through several surviving snippets of text dated to as early as the 400s AD in Denmark, our most prolific understanding of Odin comes from the Poetic Edda, or the Prose Edda, whichever you prefer, but the text of which was compiled in the 13th century of existing traditional narratives told throughout the prior centuries. As I said, at this point, we all know who Odin is, father of Thor and Loki, through pop culture, so I'm not going to belabor the point. In Final Fantasy XVI, Odin is commanded by the dominant king Barnabas of Walod, and appears to also be the stand-in for Final Fantasy's Dark Knight archetype in this game. Bahamut is a giant fish. Really. A giant fish that supports all of the oceans of the world in Islamic cosmology, at least to what we've dated to the late 13th century astrologer Zakaria el-Qazwini. In this cosmology, Earth is held up by a gigantic Atlas-like supportive angel, but in between the angel and Bahamut at the bottom stands on the top of Bahamut's back a bull, Kujata, another summons that we see from his first appearance in Final Fantasy VII as a raging bull. Bahamut as dragon deity, however, comes to us from Gary Gygax and Rob Kuntz' Dungeons & Dragons follow-up in 1975, the supplement Greyhawk. In Final Fantasy XVI, the Holy Empire of Sanbreque's crown prince, Dion Lesage, is the dominant of Bahamut, Warden of Light, and King of Dragons. Lastly, Ifrit. Come to me, Ifrit! This is a word we derive from the Quran, imparted to the Prophet Muhammad in the early 7th century AD. Ifrit are a specific type of jinn or genie, and are always spoken of in the Quran as Ifrit of the jinn. They often possess a malevolent or fiery presence, and are alternately considered beings of light. And yeah, that gets right to the point. Ifrit are vengeful fire spirits. Much more extraordinary, the dominant of Ifrit in Final Fantasy XVI is Clive Rossfield, our protagonist, and as such, suggests that Ifrit is the icon most controllable by the player in the game. See how the story unfolds around this guy, who's often sidelined in a lot of the other Final Fantasy games as the first and often weakest summon that you obtain, but under the player's power, let's max out this Ifrit's stats, shall we? And there we have it. There are more icons mentioned than this in the game, but these were the 8 featured in Sony's State of Play trailer. Are you as excited for this game as I am, with its ever-rewarding mythological flair and driving RPG action? Please feel free to let me know in the comments which of these icons you're most pumped about, and also let me know if you have any questions about what I've offered here as well. Would love it if you subscribed if you enjoyed this. Anyways, thanks for watching. Have a good one.